All right, folks, this is it. I am at the airport doing a card review. I'm traveling to Blizzard tomorrow. Well, traveling today. I'll get there tomorrow for the Theory Crafting live stream. Come watch it on Twitch, 9 a.m. Pacific time. I'll post links everywhere, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, so that you can find it. But because I'm traveling, this is the best I can do for a card review. So all the following cards have been revealed already. We're going to go through these real quick, burn through these because I don't have a lot of time. My flight board's in like 45 minutes, so we got to hurry. Real quick analysis on these, and there's 48 cards, so we got to move real quick. Starting off with Pennants, a new priest card. Lifesteal, deal 3 damage to a minion. This is amazing. Super swingy card. Good early game removal. They can also buy you some life, so Aggro Nightmare also has utility in the late game. This looks incredible. I will go ahead and say 4 stars. And moving on to Holy Ripple. 2 mana priest spell, deal 1 damage to all enemies, restore 1 health to all friendly characters. This is basically a mini Holy Nova. I think this card's going to be amazing. We've seen really good AoEs like this for 1 damage to all enemies. Think Maelstrom Portal, and the healing obviously has synergies. Northshire Clerics, maybe Quest, we'll see. But a high utility card that's cheap and flexible, so they're going to see some play. 4 stars. Sinister Deal is discover a lackey for Warlocks. I think lackeys are going to be important in some of the Warlock game plans. This is a cheap cycle. Lackeys are worth the trouble. Mana flexibility is a thing. Having 1 spare mana is fine, so this looks like a pretty solid card too. 4 stars. Injured Tol'vir, 2 mana, 2/6 taunt. Battlecry, deal 3 damage to this minion. So the challenges I offer to Quest Priest where it needs damaged minions, cards like this, along with Injured Blade Master, can help a lot. That said, I still don't really think this is good enough. 2 mana, 2/3 taunt at a base. It's going to be hard to find mana to play this on curve and heal it. If you don't want to waste a circle of healing this early, perhaps this card's going to feel kind of weak. I think it's okay, but not great. 3 stars. Beaming Sidekick, 1 mana, 1/2. Battlecry, give a friendly minion +2 health. So this is basically like the Lackey we saw, but with a little bit of extra health. The new Satanic Lackey. I think this is fine. It's not as good as something like Power Word Shield. Probably won't see play in mini decks. You're more worried about attack and aggressive decks and other ways to add extra survivability by just getting bigger stats on board. So totally fine minion, but not something you see in constructed much. 2 stars. And moving on to the the Sandhoof Waterbear, 5 mana, 5/5. At the end of your turn, restore 5 health to a damaged friendly character. So often this will be hitting your face because you'll be playing this alone on turn 5, which makes it feel kind of like an anti-heal bot with stats, which seems pretty solid. Anti-heal bot was played a lot, and there's upside for healing minions occasionally too. It might backfire from time to time, but I still think this will be a nice playable minion for Priest, even outside of a heal Priest deck. So definitely 4 stars. The Temple Berserker, 2 mana, 1/2, reborn, has +2 attack while damaged. Interesting little minion just because it's a sticky 2-drop. I think that's intriguing. The opening half stat line's not great, but the 3/1 that comes back is probably decent at trading into 3-drops. So this has some strange fringe playability, particularly in something like an aggressive reborn deck. So I'm going to go ahead and say 3 stars on this one. Serpent Egg, 2 mana, 0/3, Death Rattle, summon a 3/4 Sea Serpent. Well, we know that we've seen eggs work before. I think at the 2 mana slot, this one's totally fine. The 3/4 Sea Serpent is not as high of a high roll as something like the 5/5 we used to see in eggs, but still good enough, and decks that care about Death Rattles could use this quite successfully. So let's go ahead and say 3 stars. Never Set Thrasher, 3 mana, 4/5. Whenever this attacks, deal 3 damage to your hero. I think this is actually pretty insane. Great stat line for 3 mana. Zoo would love a minion like this. I don't think the downside's all that significant. If it gets to attack, you're happy anyway, and if it doesn't get to attack, your opponent kills it for you, then you don't even reap the downside. So I think this is actually a really strong card. I'm going to go ahead and give this one 4 stars. The Bug Collector, 2 mana, 2/1, Battlecry, summon a 1/1 Locust with Rush. I think this is a little bit weaker than something like the Hogsteed we see in Standard today, Hinchland Hogsteed, because you'd rather have the 2 attack have Rush as opposed to the 1/1 having Rush. So even though this gives you the minions immediately, there are still better wide board things. I mean, this is better than like Murloc, Tide Hunter, and a Murr outside of a Murloc deck, but still probably not good enough to make the cut for most decks. So 2-star card. Candle Taker, 3 mana, 3/2 with Reborn. Again, we get a 3/1 coming back on this minion for 3 mana, but this is a higher primary attack. I actually think this could work in an aggro deck. It's just pretty sticky. A lot of different stuff to deal with. So I would say for an aggro deck, this is going to be a 3-star card. Zephyrus the Great. This guy's going to be tough to talk about. 2 mana, 3/2. If your deck has no duplicates, wish for the perfect card. So essentially, the perfect card is a card that is determined by Blizzard's algorithm, their logic. So if you can get lethal with a fireball, it'll give you a fireball, right? If you can play something, you don't have anything to play on curve next turn, it'll give you something to play on curve. If you are out of cards, it will result in giving you a card draw card. So it has options here to basically fill in whatever need you have, and assuming that works well, this sounds amazing. It sounds like the perfect card to play, because it's going to give you the perfect card. So at only 2 mana, that's flexible, decent stat line on this. If duplicate or no duplicate Reno style Highlander decks work, this will absolutely make sense. So I would say an easy 5 stars. Moving on to Worthy Expedition. 1 mana spell for Druid. Discover a choose 1 card. So we've seen the Druid quest. This is a way to get some extra oomph for the Druid quest while also still playing something on turns when you're trying to float in mana, which is something you're going to be trying to do for Druid quest. So I think this makes a lot of sense to help fill in some gaps there while still doing something and building up for future value later. I'd say 4 stars. Ancient Mysteries, 2 mana spell for Mage. Draw a secret from your deck. It costs 0. This is a great way to cycle into cheap stuff and find the secrets, which is always a challenge for a deck like Secret Mage. It's just kind of makes your Kirin Tors a little weaker, but makes so many other things stronger that this looks like a pretty powerful card. I'd say 4 stars. Oasis Surgeon for Druid, 5 mana, 3/3 elemental with Rush, and choose 1, gain +2/+2, or summon a copy of this minion. So this is pretty nuts after you complete the Druid quest, because these will be 2 5/5s with Rush, which is insane. But even outside of this, I mean, we've seen Militia Commander work pretty well as a 5/5 with Rush. That feels good. This is only 1 mana more, so I don't think it's a dead card. And then 2 3/3 Rushes is also pretty exciting. So I think this looks good both in a quest environment, of course, but even before that, still pretty powerful. I would say 4 stars. Crystal Merchant, also Druid card, 2 mana 1/4. Any unspent mana results in you drawing a card at the end of your turn, which is kind of like something like Mana-Tide Totem. Seems like a little bit more awkward to use on occasion, but also better stat line. So some upside to pair with a downside, which means we're going to be looking at probably a 4-star card here. A lot of those so far. Dune Sculptor for Mage, 3 mana 3/3. After you cast a spell, add a random Mage minion to your hand. I don't think mages want Mage minions all that often. Although this can generate lots of value, they care more about spells. I think this is a little bit too awkward and expensive to use, so 2 stars. Golden Scarab, 3 mana 2/2. Battlecry, discover a 4-cost card. Although a pretty interesting curve play for things like Highlander decks. At the end of the day, most decks won't find a reason to run this. It's maybe better in classes like Paladin or Shaman, but still probably going to fall short for most people just because the body is not good enough for 3 mana, so 2 stars. Unseal the Vault, the Hunter Quest. Some difficulties with this one, despite some cards coming that will help hunters summon the 20 minions necessary here. I don't think the reward is really worth it, and though it's not showing the reward here, it gives all minions +2 damage for 2 mana whenever you play it, all friendly minions. So it can be an aggressive reward, but unfortunately, it's coming too late in the game because you have to summon so much stuff, and the deck you'd have to build to complete the quest probably isn't as good with the reward because it's, helpful for really hyper-aggressive stuff. So I think a little bit of a disconnect here. This probably won't see play 2 stars. The Ancestral Guardian is a 4 mana 4/2 for Paladin. Another 4 mana card for Paladin. That's going to be tough for this one. Lifesteal and Reborn is a cool combo. Could use it to get a lot of healing out of it because it's going to take a couple trades. But just because it's such a crowded slot and this doesn't do anything too exceptional, I think 2-star card. Subdue for Paladin. 2 mana, set of minions, attack, and health to 1. So this is kind of like a big minion negate style spell, almost like a Hex or a Polymorph, but it doesn't silence like a Hex or a Polymorph, right? It's not a transform. So I don't think this has quite as much utility as some of those other options, despite its lower cost. It's certainly fine. It wouldn't be a bad thing to have. Maybe in a singleton deck it makes sense, but most of the time it's going to fall short, so I'd say 3 stars. The Octosari, an 8 mana 8/8 neutral legendary that draws you 8 cards. Pretty clearly this is crazy death rattle, but it's going to be hard for most decks to want to use that. Control decks will already have a lot of cards, so does this go in an aggro deck that's got an empty hand as a top-end piece? Maybe. We've seen things like Lich King toss into aggro decks before, and this could be a reload when your opponent is forced to kill it, so I think it actually has some surprising fringe playability there. I will say 3-star card. Swarm of Locusts for 100 to help them complete the quest. 6 mana spell, summon 7 1/1 Locusts with Rush. So this might look worse than like Unleash the Hounds at first, but keep in mind that it's not conditional on board, so you can just do this if you're desperate to summon stuff or complete your quest. So a little bit of extra utility there, and still can be used as single target removal much easier than Unleash the Hounds as well. So even though it's more expensive, it has some cool applications. I don't know if it's a great card beyond that though. There's just other things Hunter would probably rather do for 6 mana, so I'd say 3 stars. The Desert Hare, neutral minion. It's a 1/1 that summons you 2 additional 1/1s. They are all beasts, so some classes would care about that. For the most part, we have better wide board token style cards at the 3 mana slot in the neutral set, so I don't think this one will get played much. 2 stars. Clever Disguise for Rogue. 2 mana spell. Add 2 random spells from another class to your hand. This looks like a great generator for Burgle decks, particularly with the Rogue quest. This makes a lot of sense, just getting you there very, very quickly, so I would say this looks like a 4-star card. Vicina, the Shaman legendary, not a totem. 4 mana 2/6. While you're overloaded, your other minions have +2 attack. So essentially, kind of bloodlust on a stick here in some ways. You can play this on turn 4 and get some nice trades. You can play this late in the game and overload the same turn to create a follow-up scenario. So I think this does have some applications. It's just a nice mid-rangey card for Shaman. It could also just be used nicely with things like Sparks that have Rush to take some good trades as well. Just this with a Voltaic Burst is a pretty powerful play to swing the board. So I see some utility here, 4 stars. The Mogu Flesh Shaper, 7 mana for 3/4, Rush, costs 1 less for each minion on the battlefield. This is a little bit like a Sea Giant, but more reactive. For that reason, I don't like it as much. It's certainly cheaper, so there are some better breakpoints for mana. Like this will come down significantly cheaply. I think some decks will find a reason to do that, but I don't think it's as big of a threat or is important to include in your deck necessarily. So, because it doesn't change your game plan. Like the reason Sea Giants rates is you got a bunch of 1/1 Sea Giants, shifts your stat lines and gives you something a little bit more survivable. This doesn't really do that, so I don't think it makes a ton of sense, but still certainly okay. So 3 stars. The Sandstorm Elemental, 2 mana 2/2 Battlecry, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions with Overload 1. This looks a lot like the Flame Caller card we saw in Mage many moons ago. And we know 1 damage AoEs can be great, and this is on a 2/2 as well, so pretty good way to react to things like Imps or Lackey boards. This seems to make a lot of sense to me. I'll say 4 stars. The Mischief-Maker, 3 mana 3/3, swap the top card of your deck with your opponents. The problem with a card like this is that you typically run good cards, not bad cards, and the chances of disrupting something really important from your opponent, I think, are slim. So it feels more like a shenanigan card than a real constructed card. It's possible that it's played, but it probably won't be most of the time. 2 stars. The Living Monument, a 10 mana 10/10 taunt. Super cool stat lines, but just far too slow. 1-star card. The Pit Crocolisk, an 8 mana 5/6 that deals 5 damage. Nice reactive thing, reminds me a bit of North Sea Kraken back in the day, but not nearly as aggressive of a stat line. So although probably a really good arena card, won't be good enough in constructed. 2 stars. The Wasteland Scorpion, a 7 mana 3/9 beast. Super slow poisonous minion here. Big stat line, which is nice, but there's just no reason for a deck to run this, so it looks like 1 star. The Blatant Decoy, 6 mana 5/5 Death Rattle. Each player summons the lowest cost minion from their hand. So kind of dirty rat effect here that could target very specific sorts of things if you know when to play it, which is intriguing. The problem is that Death Rattle doesn't happen instantly. So if you don't have a way to activate it yourself, then your opponent's going to be able to either stall it out or maybe transform it, deny it, silence it, etc. So I don't think this works that well as a tech card. You'd have to run multiple things to support it. It's going to be hard for decks to do. So although it's intriguing, it's cool that it exists. I think probably only a 2-star card. The Faceless Lurker, 5 mana 3/3 taunt, Battlecry, double this minion's health. Cool in-hand buff. Warrior taunt decks, right? If you get to 6/7 health, it's going to be pretty nuts. The thing is that going to matter enough? If you're already at that point in the game successfully with other taunts that are more consistent, just be better. You may not need more than 8 or 10 or 12 health on a minion, right? Getting up to 24 or something could be ridiculous. Although, of course, there's a really loud thing, so I'm waiting. Brock, get your bag. Brock, get your bag. Anyway, maybe somebody like Priest could use this too. I don't know. It'd be hard to get this buffed, I guess, in Priest, but Warrior, it makes sense. I just don't think it's great, so I'll say 3 stars. The Phallic Scamander, 5 mana 4/5. Your taunt minions have +2 attack. This is a weird way to like shift taunts into aggressive things. I don't think you'll need that in a hand buff deck because they'll be buffed in their attack anyway. Looks awkward. I would say fine card, but probably just 1 star. The Body Wrapper, 4 mana, 4/4 Battle Cry. Discover a friendly minion that died this game and shuffle it into your deck. This is an intriguing idea. If you only ran one specific minion and you had some reason you wanted more copies of those, this would allow you to do that. I don't think many decks are going to be able to achieve that successfully, though. So most of the time, this will give you something kind of random that extends your fatigue lifespan a little bit, but not enough to be significant. So I'd say a 2-star card. The History buff, 3 mana, 3/4. Whenever you play a minion, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. So hand buff, but conditional hand buff that requires additional cards played and additional support and additional mana seems kind of weak to me, even though this has a good base stat line. I don't know if there's enough upside, and it's only one minion that's getting buffs, so it seems pretty awkward. I will say 2-star card. So up next is Vulpera Scoundrel, 3 mana, 2/3. Discover a spell or pick a mystery choice. The mystery choice is just a random spell, so basically it's an out if you don't like any of your other spells. I don't think that adds a lot. It's fun, but I don't really see why you'd be running this card in many decks. There are probably better options. Just run things you want. So I would say 2 stars. The Quicksand Elemental, 2 mana, 2 mana, 3/2. Battlecry, give all enemy minions -2 attack this turn. That's kind of cool for classes like Priests who can do things with attack to manipulate them. For most people, that's not really that helpful. It could help you take trades like rush minions and stuff, or use your weapon without taking as much damage. But there wouldn't be a reason to run this. You'd just rather run other 2-drops to do significantly impactful things. So I will say 2 stars. The Kobold Sand Trooper, 2 mana, 2/1. Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. Intriguing, just like hyper aggressive Death Rattle card that maybe a really, really smorky Death Rattle synergy deck could use. Most people won't have a reason to do this. It's like Leper Gnome, old school Leper Gnome kind of effect, which is cool at 1 mana, but at 2, the stat line is just a little too weak, I think. So I will say 2-star card. The Spitting Camel, 2 mana, 2/4 Beast. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to another random friendly minion. So slight upside here for a pretty big downside on the effect. Most classes will not think that's worth it. There's no like enraged synergy stuff I see for this. Even like a Frothing Berserker doesn't seem to make it particularly sensible. So this looks like another 2-star card. The Dwarven Archaeologist, 2 mana, 2/3. After you discover a card, reduce its cost by 1. Well, cost reductions are cool, but you have to spend kind of 2 mana to get that reduction, so it doesn't seem as worth it to me. You get a 2/3 body, which is fine, but you're using this as a utility card, not a tempo card, so the stat line's not quite as important. I don't really see a reason most decks or classes would be willing to run this. This looks like a 2-star card. The Armored Goon, 6 mana, 6/7. Whenever your hero attacks, gain 5 armor. That's actually kind of cool. Shifting a more aggressive game plan into a defensive one, so you got a Boulder Fist Ogre stat line with some upside. We have seen the Warrior Quest that encourages attacking, which is kind of cool. We have cards like Soul Thrays that would be pretty neat with this. But at the end of the day, it still feels like it's a bit too shenanigan based, and it'd be hard to line up, get that set up, and spend 6 mana on this. And the card itself, otherwise, if this was like a 2 mana card, it'd be so much more exciting because you could slot it into a turn with the weapon and set it up for later and not feel like your whole turn's all about it. But this is committing an entire turn to it, so I think this is a 2-star card. Totemic Surge, new spell for Shaman. I'm really torn about this one. I think it's intriguing. We saw Totemic Might, which is so bad, but this gives them attack instead of health, which seems like it could be useful, turning your totems into things that are actually able to influence the game as opposed to just kind of sit there passively. And it's a 0 mana spell, which we've seen could do some pretty shenanigan-y style stuff too. At the end of the day, I think this will probably fall short just because it doesn't have quite enough oomph, and it's situational that you have to have totems that are willing to attack or able to attack. So I want to like this card. I'm like kind of holding out hope for it, but at the end of the day, I do think it's a 2-star card. The Nagas Sandwich, 5 mana, 5/5. Battlecry, change the cost of spells in your hand to 5. This is an intriguing card, right? Because 2 things can happen. You can discount spells, and you're excited about that because they get way cheaper. Alternatively, you can actually support some of these big spell decks that are looking to have big spells in hand. So you can take cheap stuff and make it bigger. But that's probably still not worth it in the end of the day because most of those rewards for those cards aren't significant enough to make it sacrifice all that mana in your hand. So in most cases, I don't think this gets there, but I guess if you're running things like Flame Strikes and Pyroblasts and big time spells, it's kind of intriguing because there's not much downside. So I'm going to keep an eye on this card. I'm going to go ahead and say this is 3 stars. So moving on to the Hyena Alpha. This was Disguised Toast card he was supposed to reveal. 4 mana, 3/3 Beast. Battlecry, if you control a secret, summon 2 2/2 hyenas. Now the hyenas are not scavenging hyenas, right? So they're not going to get buffed. They're just normal hyenas. And this is definitely looks like something like Lion King over here. So pretty big pile of stats, right, if this works. It's kind of like Hinge Clan Hag, but way better, because they're 2/2s instead of 1/1s, and they're all beasts. So there's some beast synergy stuff happening as well. So I agree with Toast. This looks like a pretty powerful battle cry, and secrets on Hunter are not particularly hard to keep active, particularly things like Rat Trap that tends to stay up for a while. So you can almost, not guarantee, but pretty consistently get this off on turn 4. So this looks like a very powerful card for Hunter. It's a total of 7/7 in stats, split across multiple bodies, beast synergies. Dare I say this is a 5-star card? I think it might be. So, moving on to the Ramekin Romka Wild Tamer, 3 mana 4/3. Battlecry, copy a random beast in your hand. So basically a resource generator for extra stuff. I don't think this is going to be worth it. The stat line's pretty interesting for 3 just because it's an aggressively minded minion, but it doesn't trade, especially favorably. A 3/4 would be more intriguing, but this isn't a beast itself, so you lose some beast synergies there. Some people will say you could run this in the the big beast package with the card that discounts something by 5. That makes a little bit of sense to me because it is a non-beast, so you can toss it in there. But nonetheless, this seems a little bit too much resource orientation and not enough tempo or aggression orientation for what Hunter typically likes to do. So I'm going to say 2 stars. And then finally, I think the Garden Gnome for Druid, a 4 mana 2/3. Battlecry, for holding a spell that costs 5 or more, summon 2/2/2 treants. So we have basically the same card as the Hyena Alpha, except its stat line's a little weaker, and perhaps even less synergies, although treants certainly are possible. And the condition, I would argue, maybe even harder for Druid. They don't love necessarily holding on to high-cost spells, although we've seen some other high-cost spell synergies, like the new card that's played for free if you play a high-cost spell. We've also just seen some big spells, the Oasis, Overflow, etc. So certainly a decent-looking card. As a big token builder, the question is, are token decks that use this in Druid going to be looking to run 5-cost spells? That seems a little iffier to me, so it may not synergize quite as well with its game plan as the Hyena that we saw previously. So I'm going to go ahead and say 3 stars for this card. And guys, that wraps it up. 48 cards are done. I hope that this was remotely enjoyable to hear, because I'm sure the audio quality is drastically lower than we're used to, but it's the best I got. It's all I can do. So you just got to make do. This is the final review for Saviors of Uldum. Thank you for watching all of these reviews. Far and away the most successful review series we've had yet. Tons of views per video and so many videos. So appreciate you hanging out. Thanks for spending your time with me. And I'll see you guys soon to talk even more about these cards and play some starting tomorrow.